Welcome, everyone. My name is Herbert Bloch. I'm the Executive Director of the American Zionist Movement, AZM. AZM is comprised of 33 national Jewish Zionist organizations and works across a broad ideological, political, and religious spectrum, linking the American Jewish community together in support of Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish people. AZM is also the U.S. Zionist Federation within the World Zionist Organization, and we recently facilitated the U.S. election to the World Zionist Congress, where over 123,000 American Jews voted for their voice in Israel. I especially thank AZM President Richard Heidemann and our other lay leaders and our election committee, chaired by Judge Abram Davdavani, for helping us lead an open and fair election. Today, we are gathered on this webinar to celebrate the anniversary of Herzl's first Zionist Congress, held in 1897 in Basel, Switzerland, from August 29th through August 31st. It ended 123 years ago today. Not only is this an historic Zionist and Jewish occasion on our calendar, it also has modern relevance as we prepare for the upcoming 38th World Zionist Congress to be held in October 2020. I don't think Herzl could have imagined a global virtual gathering, but hopefully the Congress will convene again in person next fall to continue its work. The Congress participants, the delegates from around the world, several hundred of them, who gather on a virtual platform between October 20th and 22nd of this year for the 38th World Zionist Congress, will be virtually walking in the footsteps of Herzl and deliberating in an institution, the Zionist Congress, that continues to convene the worldwide Jewish community in support of Israel and Zionism, as the Congress sets the plans and priorities of the Zionist movement and the national institutions of Israel for the coming years. In this webinar, we will learn about the history and importance of the World Zionist Congress, starting with the first Congress in 1897, which Herzl convened, as well as its continuing relevance for today. Har Herzl, known as Mount Herzl, in Jerusalem, is named after the founder of the Zionist movement, and it is much more than just a cemetery where there is a military grave site, as well as the burial sites of many great leaders, including many of the former presidents and prime ministers of Israel. It is named Har Herzl because in 1949, Theodor Herzl's remains were brought from Vienna, and he was interred in Jerusalem after the forming of the Jewish state. And the Herzl Museum and the Herzl's tomb are what the mountain is most known for, but it is also an important Zionist site and is under the auspices of and was founded by the World Zionist Organization. The platform of the Zionist movement is known today as the Jerusalem Platform, and as since the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, the Zionist Congresses have been held in Israel, but this platform and the Zionist statement began as and remains very similar to the Basel program, the platform of the first Zionist Congress convened by Herzl in 1897. So there's a direct connection between Herzl's first Zionist Congress, the Congress that meets today, and our gathering in Jerusalem when the Congress is able to meet in person. Speaking of Herzl, again, for today's webinar, we are proud to partner with the WZO Herzl Center and their team, which run the Herzl Center and Museum on Har Herzl. We thank Oded Foyer, the director, Shlomit Sattler, the educational director, Atara Volk-Itzhaki, and two Bnot Sherut national service leaders, Noah Segal and Tamar Cohen, for their presentations today. Please be sure to arrange a visit and book a tour on Har Herzl when we're all able to get to Israel in person again. I thank everyone for joining us today. You'll be hearing a lot more from the program and from AZM about the upcoming Zionist Congress. And I now turn the program over to Alicia Post, AZM's National Program and Communications Director, and I'll be back at the end to share some upcoming announcements about the Congress and other developments that will be going on in the next few months. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Herbert. For the next 10 minutes, we will feature special guests from Israel. First up, we have Mr. Abram Davdavani, or Duvdev, who has served as the chair of the World Zionist Organization since 2010. Duvdev was born in Jerusalem, where he grew up and received his education. Among his many accomplishments, he served in the IDF paratrooper regiment deployed in the liberation of Jerusalem during the Six-Day War.
חברים יקרים, ברכה ושלום מירושלים לכבוד התכנסותכם המיוחדת לקראת הקונגרס הציוני הל"ח ה-38 שאמור להתקיים בסוף חודש אוקטובר. אנחנו בגלל המצב והמגפה הקשה שיש לנו הרבה זמן של הקורונה, נאלצים בפעם הראשונה בהיסטוריה לעשות את הקונגרס באופן וירטואלי, באופן שהכל יתקיים באמצעות המדיה. אנחנו עושים כל מאמץ, עובדים מאוד קשה על זה, שהקונגרס הזה יצליח, יהיה קונגרס מעולה, ובעיקר שנוכל לקיים אותו כהלכתו, וכל הדברים שכתובים בחוקה, כיצד קונגרס צריך להתקיים, והצבעות וועדות וכל הדברים האלה, יתקיימו והוא יהיה קונגרס כשר למהדרין, כי זה המטרה העיקרית שלנו בקונגרס הזה, ונשמור על כך שלא לעבור את 5 שנים מאז הקונגרס הקודם. אבל לא רק זה גרמה לנו הקורונה, היא גם הכתיבה לנו במידה רבה מה יהיו הנושאים שנדבר עליהם בקונגרס, מעבר לכל הנושאים התחוקתיים שצריך לעבור. ואלה הנושאים שדווקא הם מיוחדים לתקופה הזו כתוצאה מהקורונה שעברנו אותה. האחד זה ערבות הדדית, ישראל ערבי זה לזה, אבל ערבות הדדית בתוכנו בקנה מידה עולמי, לא רק בתוך העם היושב בציון, ולא רק בתוך הקהילות שלנו, אלא גלובלית, עם כל יהודי בכל מקום בעולם, במצב הזה, ואנחנו נעסוק בנושא הזה ונראה מה ההשלכות של הנושא הזה על פעילות ההסתדרות הציונית העולמית בתקופה הקרובה. והנושא השני, זה הפתח שנפתח לעלייה גדולה לארץ ישראל. אנחנו כבר מזהים שבהרבה מקומות יש הענות גדולה, יש התעניינות גדולה בנושא העלייה, בגלל המצב ובגלל שהקורונה הבליטה לכל אחד ואחד, שבעצם הבית האמיתי שלו נמצא במדינת ישראל, ולשם הוא צריך לכוון את דרכו בעתיד. ושני הנושאים האלה יעמדו במרכז הדברים. שאר הנושאים שבדרך כלל אנחנו דנים בהם בקונגרס, בנושא של התקופה מבחינה ציונית, התקופה בתוך העם היהודי ומה זה מחייב אותנו, כל הנושאים הגלובליים הללו, אנחנו נדחה אותם לקונגרס מיוחד שלא מן המניין, שנקיים אותו ברגע, תוך שנה על כל פנים מקסימום, אבל בזמן שנוכל להיפגש פנים אל פנים. כי גם זה חוויה מאוד חשובה שחייבים לעבור אותה, אבל אותה נעשה כבר סביב הנושאים הגלובליים בתקופה שברגע שנוכל לבצע אותה. והרכב הקונגרס שלא מן המניין, אותו קונגרס, הוא כמובן עם אותם צירים, עם אותם אנשים, אין שום שינוי בדבר. בצורה כזו אנחנו מקווים שנעבור שנה מצוינת, שתקדם את התנועה הציונית ואת כל הפדרציות הציוניות וה-IZM ואחרים בכל מקום אל היעדים הנכונים של הציונות בדורנו.
So now you know a bit more about the now. Let's go back to the then with Dr. Aliza Lavie, the chair of the Herzl Center, Merkaz Herzl. If you've been attending our talkless Hebrew classes, then you may know the word Merkaz means center. Dr. Lavie served as a member of the Knesset between 2013 and 2019 and is a senior lecturer at the School of Communications at Bar Ilan University. She is a well-known author, publicist, media personality, and social activist.
Shalom from Merkaz Herzl Center in Jerusalem. My name is Aliza Lavie, and I'm the chairperson here at Merkaz Herzl, and I'm really happy to speak with you in this amazing moment. When we think about Herzl, Herzl writes in his diary, "In Basel, I founded a Jewish state." This becomes an iconic statement, as well as the ending of that statement. If I had said it out loud today, a general laugh would have come to me as an answer. Maybe in 5 years, or at least in 50 years, everything will be recognized. A year and a half later, the first Jewish Congress convenes in Basel. Zionism is the return to Judaism, even before their return to the land of Israel. This is how Herzl opened the first Zionist Congress in Basel today, 123 years ago. The first Zionist Congress was a significant event. This was the first time since the destruction of the Second Temple and the exile from Israel that so many Jews from across the world, different backgrounds, different communities, men and women gathered to discuss of the Jewish issues. The first Zionist Congress convenes in Basel, headed by Herzl, establishment of the World Zionist Organization. Herzl is the one that was elected president of the new World Zionist Organization. The Congress accepted the Basel Plan. Zionism strives to establish the homeland for the people of Israel in the land of Israel, guaranteed by the general law. 197 delegates are present at the opening of the Congress. Herzl, who wanted to give the Congress a particularly festive look, demands of all deputies to appear in fancy clothes, a black suit and a white tie. These people, he said, these people should see the Congress as the most sublime and solemn. He tells to Nodar. Nodar didn't pay attention to this, and Herzl told him, "Go back and bring your black jacket. Hey, we established a state." The Jewish and the general press sends many journalists to cover the special Jewish gathering. The dream of returning home to Zion, to longing for generation to the land of Israel, is ancient and is the beginning heart of the Jewish uniqueness and togetherness.
We will hear more from Dr. Lavie later on. Throughout the summer, you may have joined us for one of our tours of the Herzl Center. If so, Tamar, Cohen, and Noah Segal, the Herzl Center Bnot Sherut Madrichot, or National Service Leaders, need no introduction. If you've missed the opportunity, today is their last day of service, but these incredible recent young Oalim from California and Connecticut have been sharing their knowledge all summer, and we know that they will continue to be Zionist leaders and examples for future American young adults. They were definitely raised well, and in fact, Noah's family is making Aliyah this week. Please join me as they share their final journey from the first Congress to the Herzl Museum. To see a longer version of this video, The link will be put in the chat, and we will also send out the video link after.
Theodor Herzl publishes his first book called The Jewish State in 1896, which details a point-by-point outline on how to establish a safe haven for the Jewish people away from anti-Semitism. The Jewish state gains momentum, and Herzl begins to gather supporters around the idea of a state for the Jews. In just a year and a half, Herzl brings them into the municipal hall in Basel, Switzerland, to unite forces as Jews and ask an important question. What's the next step? What are we going to do to save the Jewish people? Here at the Herzl Museum in the second room, we have recreated the municipal hall in Basel, Switzerland, where Herzl established many of the Zionist congresses.
For the first time in 2,000 years, community representatives from all over the world gather in their finest attire to discuss the Jewish future. There were 208 representatives from 16 different countries in attendance. The first Zionist Congress opens up with the Blessing of Shahianu, the prayer recited at special occasions to express gratitude to God for enabling us to reach this occasion. This is followed by 15 minutes of applause before Herzl is able to give his address. In his speech, Herzl declares that Zionism is a return to Judaism, even before it is a return to our land. At the first Zionist Congress, the Basel program was adopted with the purpose of defining the goals of the World Zionist Organization. The main goal was to establish a home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. After the first Congress, Herzl reflects in his diary and writes, "In Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I said this out loud today, I would be answered by universal laughter. Perhaps in 5 years, certainly in 50, everyone will know it." The impact of this Congress was immeasurable. It re-energized the Jewish people and instilled hope for a Jewish state. Herzl convenes a total of 6 congresses in his lifetime, in which they discuss ways to establish a Jewish state. In 1903, a pogrom breaks out in Kishinev, causing Herzl to seek immediate shelter for the Jews. In the 6th Zionist Congress, Herzl proposes the Uganda Plan, a plan to establish an interim state in Uganda, because while Herzl believes that the ultimate goal is to establish a state for the Jews in our historic homeland, the safety of Jews takes priority. The 6th Zionist Congress, the Uganda Congress, is also known as the Congress of Tears because of the rift it creates within the movement. On the one hand, we have an obligation to save Jews, and on the other hand, a desire to remain loyal to Zion. To emphasize his commitment to Zion, Herzl ends the Congress with the words, "If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither." The Zionist Congresses allowed for a concrete way to begin the process of establishing a future Jewish state in our national homeland. It is through these Congresses that institutions we know today were created. The Jewish National Fund, otherwise known as Kakal, the Keren Kayemet L'Yisrael, was established in 1901 at the 5th Zionist Congress. The JNF is an organization with the initial goal of buying and developing land in the land of Israel, and has now grown and evolved into an organization that strengthens the connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. The Zionist Congresses have continued to this day and continuously work to fulfill and further the Zionist dream.
Wow, wow, wow. What an incredible Zionist leaders. Don't you just want to book your trip now and plan your visit to the center? Speaking of Zionist leaders, Dr. David Brakestone serves as the Deputy Chairman of the Executive of the Jewish Agency for Israel and previously served as the Vice Chairman of the World Zionist Organization, where he was the conceptual architect and founding director of its Herzl Museum and Education Center. He made Aliyah from the United States in 1974 and earned his doctorate from the Hebrew University in field of teaching Israel. He writes a regular column for the Jerusalem Post and blogs for the Times of Israel, primarily addressing contemporary issues in Israeli society and Jewish life worldwide. I would now like to welcome David.
Good. So
Wonderful.
thank you for that introduction, and I'm thrilled to be here as part of this event. But the truth is, I'm expecting another guest to join us, who I think will be even more insightful in terms of the Zionist Congress and what it's all about. Let me just check if he's here. Give me just a second.
Huh. The suspense is killing me. Who might it be? Let me guess. David Ben-Gurion? Golda Meir. I know. Netta. Noah. I guess we'll just have to wait and see who it is. Dr. Herzl, we are honored to have you with us as we're preparing for the 38th Zionist Congress.
Indeed, and I'm pleased to be here. I have to tell you, I don't appear in public very often anymore, but when I heard there were people still interested in the Zionist Congress, I said I would make myself available.
You sound surprised that there is interest.
Yes, unfortunately, with great pain and disappointment. I'm well aware that the term Zionism has itself become rather offensive to many these days.
How do you explain that?
I'm sorry, but I believe it is you that owes me an explanation. How can it be that such a grand idea, a movement of such lofty aspirations, was allowed to degenerate like this in the public consciousness? A community must have an ideal, I once wrote, for it is that which drives us. The ideal is for the community what bread and water are for the individual, and our Zionism, which led us hither and which will lead us still further to yet unknown heights, is but an ideal, an infinite, endless ideal. I entrusted you with my legacy, and look what's become of it. Honestly, I expected more of you.
Perhaps then you can help us recover some of that spirit. Take us back to the first Zionist Congress. Was there anything said there that remains relevant today?
Sadly, far too much.
Sadly?
Yes, listen to what Max Nordau had to say. All at once, after a slumber of 30 to 60 years, anti-Semitism once more broke out from the innermost depths of the nations and revealed to the highest of the mortified Jew his real situation, which he had no longer seen. Nordau's words, of course, were an echo of my own. We have honestly endeavored everywhere, I said, to merge ourselves into the social life of surrounding communities and to preserve the faith of our fathers. We are not permitted to do so. In vain are we loyal patriots, our loyalty in some places running to extremes. In vain do we strive to increase the fame of our native lands in science and art, or her wealth by trade and commerce. In countries where we have lived for centuries, we are still cried down as strangers. Who could have imagined more than 120 years later, you'd be facing the same intense anti-Semitism you are contending with today? Certainly not I. I was absolutely convinced that the phenomenon would disappear with the rise of the Zionist movement, even before we had a state of our own. Yet what I said in my opening remarks to the delegates at the first Zionist Congress might just as well have been written for your upcoming gathering. We shall hear reports, I said to those who were gathered, of the Jewish situation in the various countries. You all know, even if only in a vague way, that with few exceptions, the situation is not cheering. Or otherwise, we should probably not have convened.
Wow. Are you saying that anti-Semitism was the reason for the existence of the Congress?
Absolutely not. While it may have been the catalyst for turning me into a Zionist, that transformation was accompanied by a swelling pride in being Jewish and an intense desire that others come to feel as I did. Also from my opening address, the sentiment of solidarity with which we as Jews have been reproached so frequently and so acrimoniously by our detractors was in the process of disintegrating. When we were then attacked by anti-Semites, anti-Semitism served to strengthen it anew. We returned home, as it were, for Zionism is a homecoming to the Jewish fold, even before it is a homecoming to the Jewish land.
Still, it sounds like self-preservation was your objective.
The well-being of the Jewish people was certainly at the foundation of my efforts, but I envisioned that as being much more than a matter of mere survival. Another excerpt from my opening speech. The Congress will concern itself with the spiritual means to be employed for reviving and fostering the national consciousness of the Jews.
Would you say that was the greatest achievement of the first Congress?
In Basel, I founded the Jewish state.
Yeah, we know that. But to paraphrase, had you said that out loud at the time, you would have been met with universal laughter. But in 5 years, certainly in 50, everyone would know it to be true. But is there anything concrete that you can point to as a success of the Congress?
Absolutely. We succeeded in fulfilling the primary objective of the gathering. With these words that I greet the 200 plus delegates who arrived in Basel from 17 countries. There is much to be accomplished within the space of 3 days. We want to lay the cornerstone of the edifice, which is one day to house the Jewish nation. Through this Congress, we are creating an agency for the Jewish people, such as it is not possessed heretofore, an agency of which it was in urgent need. Our cause is too great to be left to the ambition of or discretion of individuals. It must be elevated to the realm of the impersonal if it is to succeed, and our Congress shall live forever, not only until the redemption from age-long suffering, but afterwards as well. What better evidence is there of the solid infrastructure that we managed to erect in those 3 days in that fateful August than the fact that you will once again be convening in October to continue the work that I began.
And not to be taken for granted either. Not many enterprises remain intact for more than a century after their establishment. Other outcomes that we should be aware of?
One other that I thought would last, but that unfortunately again demands your attention. Even before the proceedings had gotten underway, I proudly declared at the Congress, Zionism has already brought about something remarkable, heretofore regarded as impossible, a close union between the ultra-modern and the ultra-conservative elements of Jewry. The fact that this has come to pass without undignified concessions on the part of either side, without intellectual sacrifices, is further proof, if such proof be necessary, of the national entity of the Jews.
I didn't even realize that that was an issue back in your time. I thought the animosity and mutual recriminations that are so much a part of Jewish life were something that we had manufactured. So I suppose if I were to ask you what needs to be on the agenda for the upcoming Congress, unity would be included?
Absolutely. And I tell you, I've been reading the papers lately and I'm concerned. I don't know if it's true or not, and I sincerely hope that it isn't, but there have been a number of articles in the press as recently as today asserting that certain public figures and one particular party are intent on dominating the national institutions. When I founded the World Zionist Organization, I was intent on ensuring that the entire spectrum of the Jewish world would feel at home within it. I know that you believe this to be important as well. The American Zionist Movement has been touting the WZO as the parliament of the entire Jewish people, the one place where the full spectrum of political and religious views are represented with positions and resources distributed equitably and in a manner such that all will feel they have a stake in their success. As negotiations proceed in advance of the Congress, I can't urge you strongly enough to make sure that that continue to be the case. If not, it will lose all credibility and alienate the very Jews around the world you want to attract. Don't misunderstand me. I don't expect you to be unified in thought, but I would like to see you unified in purpose and unified in spirit. discussion, dialogue, even argument, they're all integral to the reasons that you're coming together. But I want to say to the delegates in 2020 what I said to them in 1897. There shall be no question of intrigues, secret interventions, and devious methods in our ranks, but only of unhampered utterances under the constant and complete supervision of public opinion.
Thank you for those remarks. I can only hope that those conducting the negotiations will take them to heart. In the meantime, we want to move ahead with the substance of the Congress. What would you recommend we focus on?
Reclaiming and reframing the Zionist ideal. What we spoke about at the beginning of this interview, making sure that the next generation understands Zionism as I intended it to be understood.
As being about the creation of a refuge for the Jewish people.
Hogwash! I thought I made myself clear in this regard. Of course there is the necessity for having a safe haven for Jews to call home. But you know very well that in addition to providing in the Jewish state a detailed blueprint for how to achieve that, I described in even greater detail in Alt Neuland my vision of the exemplary society I expected you to build here. And to make it crystal clear what I had in mind, I spelled it out just before my untimely death. I truly believe that even after we possess our land, I wrote, Zionism will not cease to be an ideal, for Zionism includes not only the yearning for a plot of the promised land legally acquired for our weary people, but also the yearning for ethical and spiritual fulfillment. That's the message of Zionism that the Congress has to focus on conveying. Spend your time figuring out how to get it across to the next generation. It's not going to happen unless you are prepared to meet them on their turf. And the first step is in trying to understand why so many of them are currently altogether disinterested in Israel, if not outright antagonistic. Don't lecture them, engage them. Listen to what they have to say about alternative narratives.
Wow, but there's such hostility out there. I mean, so much of it is unjustified.
I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm just saying that this is the challenge that the Congress should be dealing with.
And what about all the other issues on the agenda of Israeli society today?
Of course, they're important, but please don't delude yourselves into thinking that all of them are within the realm of the Congress to impact. Don't waste your time on meaningless and far too often divisive resolutions that have no practical implications, other than making those putting them forward feel self-important.
Is what we'll be doing then of any significance whatsoever?
Most certainly. If you concentrate on what you have the wherewithal to effect in pursuit of the Jerusalem program, which, by the way, I commend you on, I say to you what I said to the delegates I brought together. Wherever we shall be, and however distant the accomplishment of our task, let our Congress be earnest and high-minded, a source of welfare to the unhappy, of defiance to none, of honor to all Jewry. Let it be worthy of our past, the renown of which, though remote, is eternal. In the coming hour, the news of our deliberations and decisions will fly to distant lands over the 7 seas. Therefore, enlightenment and comfort should go forth from this Congress. Let everyone find out what Zionism really is. Let everyone find out what Zionism really is, that it is a moral, lawful, humanitarian movement directed toward the long yearned for goal of our people.
Amen. And thank you for that inspiring message. I am sure you are quite busy, but if you have time, would you stick around for some questions?
Less busy than you might imagine. Remember, I've been in bidud, in isolation, for a lot longer than any of you.
And wow, how good you are at modern technology. It's really amazing since you really, I understand you didn't have it at Zoom at that time.
No, but I was a great believer in modern technology, modern at the times and you've certainly taken that to the next step.
Well, thank you so much. We look forward to having you back with us. Next up, we have David Matlow. David is a partner at Goodman LLP in Toronto. He owns the world's largest collection of Herzl memorabilia, and his Herzl project is one-person initiative to inform people about Herzl and inspire them to complete his dream. David is a regular speaker about Herzl, using his collection to help people connect to Herzl's work. His book, Collecting the Dream, is available for free for a Kindle download on Amazon right now until midnight, commemorating the 123rd anniversary of the first Zionist Congress. We will also post the link in the chat, and if you need it, you can always contact me. But now, to show you some artifacts from his collection and talk about some Zionist history from the Congress, my friend, David Matlow.
Thank you, Alicia, and hello, everyone. I want to show on the occasion of this auspicious anniversary a number of items from the first Zionist Congress and subsequent Congresses to give you the idea of how formal and organized and structured these events were. So the first Zionist Congress, we heard, was in 1897. When you arrived at the Congress, you received a delegate card such as this, and you'll see the imagery that Herzl wanted included on the card. This is Jews praying at the Kotel, and here is a farmer planting the soil in Eretz Yisrael. Herzl insisted that the Congress be transparent. It's not secretive. And so, as you saw in the video from the Herzl Center, there was a composite picture with all of the delegates, and he insisted that minutes be maintained of the Congress. These are the minutes from the first Zionist Congress. They were printed shortly thereafter in Vienna in 1898, and they're bound minutes from each of the Congresses. There was also a resolution passed at the Congress that Herzl's speeches be printed and circulated separately. So this is the speech given by Herzl at the Zionist Congress, and you'll see it was printed in Vienna in 1897. Another way to communicate to the world what was going on, the important work at the first Zionist Congress. There was also swag, souvenirs that were handed out at the Congress. This is a replica of the pin that was handed out. This replica was circulated on the 30th anniversary of the first Zionist Congress. This was in 1927 at the 15th Congress. It's very hard to see what that logo was, but this was the logo of the Congress as appears on the top of a flagpole. And you will see it is the Magen David with 7 stars, which is Herzl's idea for the flag of the Zionist movement. The 7 stars represented the 7 hours of the workday that Herzl envisioned. And inside, it's a lion, and you'll see Kakal Karen Kayemet L'Israel, which you heard about in the video from the Herzl Center. One other item from the first Zionist Congress is this bound book. It was a lecture by Max Mandelstam, which was translated. Max Mandelstam was a prominent Zionist. It was translated into Yiddish and published, translated into Yiddish by Shalom Aleichem, if you can believe it. And then it was published in New York on Canal Street. Again, what happened at the Zionist Congress was broadly circulated. It was so momentous, Herzl and all the delegates wanted to share exactly what was going on. But it wasn't only at the first Zionist Congress that there was swag and planning and structure. There were 22 Zionist Congresses before Israel's independence. And I have things from each of them, and I obviously can't show something from all of them. But this is the delegate card from the second Zionist Congress. But what you'll find interesting is this is a press pass, journalisten card. So there were journalists at all the Congresses, as I said, open and transparent. And this big card, I don't know, it's about 10 inches by 7 inches, was something that the journalists held. And you'll see in the middle of it, the Zionist logo that I showed you from the first Zionist Congress. In behind me is a picture from the Second Zionist Congress, which incidentally also ended on August 31st, but this was in 1898. It's hard to see because it's probably small for you, but it shows all of the delegates in the tuxedos that we heard about previously. The Fourth Zionist Congress was held in London. There were 6 Zionist Congresses during Herzl's lifetime. 5 were in Basel, but Herzl wanted the 4th one in London to cultivate relationships with the British government. And this is from that Congress, Fourth Zionist Congress, but interestingly, it's an invitation to a banquet. So just like there are now in conferences and meetings, there was a formal banquet by the delegates, for the delegates put on by the English Zionists for their foreign co-workers. If you attended the Fourth Zionist Congress, you were fortunate enough to get a medal on a ribbon such as this, indicating that you were a delegate. There was also other swag at different congresses. Here's an example. This is from the 12th Zionist Congress, which was in 1921. The cufflinks from the 12th Zionist Congress. And it comes in a case that says 12th Zionist Congress. As all of you know, when you attend conferences and congresses, when you register, you get a portfolio, you get a bag, you get something with your materials. And the Zionist Congresses were no different. This is from the 14th Zionist Congress held in Vienna in 1925. That's the Yud Dalet, the logo from the 14th Congress. And this is just a portfolio which would have your registration materials and other items. One of my favorites of all of them is the portfolio from the 19th Zionist Congress, which was held in Lucerne, Switzerland. And inside it, there was advertising. And this is the SS Tel Aviv. They were advertising to the delegates a way to get to Palestine, to Eretz Yisrael, aboard the SS Tel Aviv. There are many, many other items from the Congresses. It's really reflective in the early days of Herzl's vision to make this serious, organized. Wearing the tuxedos was, as my mother used to say, if you want to be taken seriously, dress seriously. And the planning that Herzl did during his lifetime that was continued after the Sixth Zionist Congress illustrates the important business, the dignified work, the respect that was given to the delegates that continues to this day through to the 38th Zionist Congress, which will be held virtually in 2 months. So thank you. I hope you found that interesting to get a sense of some of the souvenir items and the memorabilia that was available at the Congresses over the years.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. And I really hope to be able to come visit you and see the collection. It's been a long time overdue. And, you know, also return Theo, our beloved mascot, to you as well, which we are, I guess, co-parenting at the moment. But we really look forward, and thank you so much.
My pleasure. All we need are the borders to open. You're welcome anytime.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so next I would like to introduce Jeff Becker, AZM's coordinator for the U.S. election for the World Zionist Congress. He'll share a little bit more about the now of the Zionist Congress.
Thank you, Alicia. Earlier this year, for 7 weeks from January to March, American Jews had a direct opportunity to now walk in the footsteps of Herzl by voting for U.S. representatives to the 38th World Zionist Congress. When providing context as to why the Congress is significant today, it's important to recognize the energy and passion amongst Jews from across the US and the world who knew that this is their moment to have a seat at the table and to have their voice heard. In the US election for the 38th World Zionist Congress this year, we witnessed a historic turnout. Over 123,000 American Jews voted from all 50 states, DC, and 3 US territories. That's more than double the votes cast in the last election 5 years ago. They were voting for 15 slates with 1,800 delegates coming from a highly diverse pool of political affiliations, religious denominations, demographics, and Zionist ideologies, including more female and young candidates than ever before. We look at this engagement as a sign of a bright future for American Jewry and for Zionism in general, a future that creates a bigger bridge for American Jews to connect with and fight for Israel and their personal Zionist beliefs. I thank AZM and the WZO Herzl Center for having me on this webinar to explain a bit more about the relevance of the Zionist Congress today. We will show you a brief video which AZM produced for voter education. You can also see it at azm.org/elections and on the AZM YouTube channel, youtube.com/American Zionist. Thank you.
From every corner of the globe, the connection between Israel and the Jewish people has deep roots. Israel is a place that inspires us and challenges us. It moves us and mystifies us. It is a place that is deeply spiritual for many, while existing within the realities of the modern world. And most of the time, it does these things all at once. But there's one feeling you don't have to experience when it comes to Israel: the feeling of being a spectator on the sidelines. Because even though we're not there, there is a way for us, as American Jews, to make an impact and shape the fabric and future of Israel and the Jewish diaspora. How? By voting for delegates to the 38th World Zionist Congress between January 21st and March 11th, 2020, the only democratically elected international body that decides the direction of world Jewry. Founded in 1897 by Theodore Herzl, throughout history, the Congress builds bridges among world Jewry, helps Jews immigrate to Israel, builds up communities throughout Israel, fights anti-Semitism, and strengthens the connection between the Jewish diaspora and Israel. American Jews make up nearly 30% of the Congress, and through their votes and those of their peers in Israel and around the world, in late 2020, the 38th Congress will meet and address these important issues, and also the spending of $1 billion a year in funding for Israel and Jewish communities worldwide. In the US, the American Zionist Movement is responsible for administering the election for the World Zionist Congress. It's a rare opportunity for Jews across America to vote for a Congress that represents their values on issues affecting the Jewish community worldwide. Whatever path you follow, you can make your voice heard and build a better tomorrow.
Thank you to all our participants. We will have a few minutes for some questions. We may go a little past 1 for those who are able to stay on. Again, the recording of this will be available on the AZM website, along with other material about the Zionist Congress that we'll be sharing with you and others who participated, and that you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. Just to connect from the last video for a moment, and then we'll have a questions or two that have come up in the chat. The Zionist Congress that will meet in October, the 38th Zionist Congress, includes 525 elected delegates from dozens of countries around the world. About a third of them, 152, are elected from the United States. An additional 2 alternates per each delegate will participate as well. There are some other representatives of international organizations. So altogether, there is about 700 delegates and double that number of alternates. So it'll be a large virtual gathering, which we hope will meet in person, as Chairman Duvdevani mentioned at the beginning, to continue in person in an inspiring gathering. It's like a Zionist worldwide convention that will meet next year in Jerusalem, as we say, on Pesach, but in this case, we really mean it next year in Jerusalem for the continuation of the Zionist Congress. One question that's come up, and maybe I'll turn to both David Matlow and to Shlomit Sadler from the Herzl Center, is about Americans who participated in the first Zionist Congress 123 years ago, as well as women. How many Americans were there, and how many women were there even in that first Zionist Congress? I will note that, and maybe Shlomit can comment on this as well if I got it correctly, even at the Second Zionist Congress, women were already able to vote. It was posted on social media a few weeks ago on the anniversary of the 100th anniversary of suffrage in America, that it was 100 years ago in America that women voted, but it was 122 years ago that they voted in the Zionist movement. I hope I got that correct, but can you comment, Shlomit and David, on women and Americans at the first Congress?
Shlomit, you want to go?
Yes, I'll talk about the women. I have in front of me the protocols of the First Zionist Congress, including the lists, which I highlighted the women, but there were 15 women that took part in the First Zionist Congress 123 years ago. And as you said, from the Second Congress in 1898, women were able to vote in the Zionist Congress. And what you have to understand is that in comparison to anything that's happening around the world, the only country that year that women are allowed to or are able to vote is New Zealand. Everywhere else, women don't have the opportunity or the option to vote. And Herzl gives them the opportunity then, which later on in Israeli history, that will be the main reason that the first election takes place in Israel after the state has been established. It is clear, there's no question that women and men are voting just the same. I don't know about Americans. I can sit and count them as we speak.
So let me answer the question about Americans. I too have the minutes of the First Zionist Congress, which is one of the reasons Herzl insisted that they be published. So there were delegates to the First Zionist Congress from New York, representatives of the Lovers of Zion, the Amalgamated Zionistic Organizations of Greater New York, Reverend Dr. H. Pereira Mendes and Dr. Michael Singer, and from New York, Brooklyn, representatives of Chovevei Zion. I know by the Second Zionist Congress in 1898, Rabbi Stephen Wise was there and other delegates, and I know that because he wrote an article for Vanity Fair magazine describing the Second Zionist Congress in 1898. So there have been delegates from the United States to all of the Zionist Congresses from the first.
And David, I can see someone from Baltimore too, Dr. S. Schaufer, something like that. But I don't know more about him, just that he's from Baltimore. That's what I can see.
So I have a question. We've got a number of questions, and we'll try to respond to some of them, a couple of them now and others even in writing after. For David Brakestone, aka Herzl, can you explain now how people in Israel participate in the Zionist Congress? Obviously, those living there didn't participate in the first Congress. Can you give us a minute on how that is included now?
Actually, Herb, that's an interesting question. I don't know if anybody from living in Eretz Yisrael at the time was at the Congress. Maybe somebody else does have the answer to that. In any case, the way that they participate today are based on the representation of the different Zionist parties in the Knesset. For every Knesset member that a Zionist party has, for every Chaver Knesset that a Zionist party has, they get approximately 2 delegates to the Zionist Congress, selected by the parties themselves. They are not elected by the Israeli public. It's been an issue that has been raised repeatedly over the years, whether or not those in Israel should be required to vote for their representatives to the Congress. Obviously, when people vote for the Knesset elections, they don't have the Zionist Congress in mind, but the political parties in Israel have prevented any suggestion going forth about having elections for the Congress here.
I'll just add, there were 2 representatives from Yafo, from Jaffa, that took part in the First Zionist Congress. What I will say that many people that took part in the First Zionist Congress later on will be making Aliyah to Israel, and they will be participating as representatives of the Yeshuv in the Congresses taking part later on.
And we do know, but not for this, it could be a whole webinar in and of itself, that after the First Zionist Congress couple of years later, Herzl did make a trip to the land of Israel. Then under the under the I guess under the Ottoman rule. There is a question also about, a couple of questions have come up. Let me try to answer them in general. The Zionist Congress this year, we hope, but again, it's WZO is working on these arrangements in this new era of technology for the virtual Congress, that there will be ability for people to watch and observe, obviously voting and things like that, and certain committees and proceedings are for delegates and alternates, but we will provide further information about that. There's a question about the relationship between the WZO and the Zionist Congress and the Jewish Agency. So maybe I'll give David Brakestone a second to answer that.
Okay, the World Zionist Organization actually puts forward the candidates to head the Jewish Agency, Keren HaYesod, and Keren Kayemet. Those positions are all ultimately voted on by the bodies themselves, but the candidates come from the World Zionist Organization. So indeed, it has a huge impact on the national institutions overall. And then in terms of the relationship between the Jewish Agency and the World Zionist Organization, 50% of all of the governing bodies and committees of the Jewish Agency are themselves representatives of the World Zionist Organization. The Jewish Agency is a partnership of the WZO, of Keren HaYesod, and of the Jewish Federations of North America. And 50% of, as I said, of all those committees and governing bodies come from the Congress itself.
I'm going to take one question, which is an interesting one I never really thought of that we got, and then we'll wrap up with some closing remarks from the Herzl Center. The question that was posed, I think it came on a Facebook question. This has been broadcast on Facebook Live as well, is about the funding for the Zionist Congress. How did Herzl pull this off? Where did he get the funding from? Were there some main donors? We can all imagine it's easy to pull together a conference now in the modern era, but how did he fund this and make it happen in the era in 1897? So maybe we'll start with Shlamit or David on that. David Matlow.
David, do you want to start?
There was a system that was established called the shekel, where people who joined the Zionist organization in the various countries would have to pay a shekel or the equivalent, £1, $1, whatever it was in each country, and that went to finance the Zionist organization. I assume, though I don't know specifically, maybe David Breakstone does, that a portion of those dues then went to a central organization. I have in my collection many letters from Herzl pleading to Zionist organizations in various countries, please make your remittances. And because the main mothership was in need of financing. So I expect that's not very different 120 years later than it is now. But my understanding is that the shekel system was an annual due exercise, and I have a collection of shekels from various countries in the world. David Brakestone, do you want to elaborate on that?
That was absolutely part of it. Of course, he also had a WhatsApp group and crowdfunding, which helped. Not to mention his wife's family's fortune, which he depleted very quickly, in addition to his own. He came from a wealthy family, but his wife was even wealthier, and a huge amount of the expenses that went into the creation of the Zionist movement really came from the family accounts.
I'll just add, David, I know that the system of the shekel started at the Second Zionist Congress, and from what I understand, it's connecting to what David just said, most of the expenses for the First Zionist Congress came from Herzl himself, including his father, who put in a lot of money at that point. but also his wife, but also from the Jewish community of Basel, the Rabbi Cohen there, who a lot of the expenses that were happening on the ground were taken upon the Jewish community in Basel.
And of course, when Herzl died in 1904, his family was bankrupt. So there was a fund created by David Wolfson, his successor, to raise money to look after his children, and essentially saying, Herzl did so much for us, it's now time for us to return the favor to his children.
Absolutely.
And that's the story of our museum, because the heart of the museum is Herzl's study, which that was part of that appeal, because David Wolfson bought it off the family in order to give the family some money. So that's in the Herzl Museum in Jerusalem. So when everyone can, you're welcome to come and visit.
On that note, I think we will thank Shlomit, David, and David for your presentations, as well as, of course, our indefatigable National Program and Communications Director, Alicia Post, who will come back with some closing technical comments. We want to thank everyone for being on this webinar. Don't go away yet. We will have some closing remarks at the end as you exit from the director of the Herzl Center on Herzl's Vision, again, Dr. Aliza. We want to let everyone know we have another Zionist program coming up 3 weeks from tomorrow with Natan Sharansky, the former chairman of the Jewish Agency, but a prisoner of Zion in the former Soviet Union, the USSR, who will talk about his fight for Zionism and together with, and his new book that he authored together with the noted Zionist author, Gil Troy, who's written the book, The Zionist Ideas. That's September 22nd. You can see that and a lot more AZM program information on our website, azm.org. AZM is an umbrella organization of 33 national Jewish Zionist groups, as mentioned before, and as well as our role as the Zionist Federation in the World Zionist Organization system. And we are happy to connect with anyone about our programs and have you involved. For those who want to commemorate a loved one, especially in this memorial season coming up in the High Holy Days, there is an opportunity to dedicate a memorial plaque now on Har Herzl and have loved one's name on Mount Herzl in Jerusalem, and you can see that on the AZM website or contact us as well. So before we go to Aliza Lavie's closing remarks, I'll turn this back over to Alicia Post, and thank you all for participating.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to thank everyone. It really continues to inspire me to see interest and excitement in Zionism and the Zionist Congress, something that I personally and professionally hold near and dear. I want to wish you all a Shana Tova, and we look forward to seeing you at the Congress in October. So stay safe, stay healthy, and we welcome back the video from Dr. Aliza Lavie. Thank you all.
Yeah. Herzl wasn't the first one that said this, but Herzl was the first one that understood that we need to work together, to bring all the Jews together, to be united, and to understand that together we can do it. We can establish land of Israel and established together the promise that God gave us. Yet, he is the one that can sweep the masses to his plan. How does he do it? What was his secret? Why he was the one that understood the situation and made the togetherness happen? How does he succeed much more than others? This is not historic questions. This is a question that we together should ask and learn from the answers and make a work together from this understanding, because Herzl knew something that we should study, learn, understand from his activity. The World Zionist Organization is the home for all the Jewish of the world. Then and now, Jews in the land of Israel and Jews around the world. It needs to continue to take care of for all the Jews in this time of Corona, and to think of technologies that continue the relationship and conversation. We at the Herzl Center place the dialogue at the center, the same conversation that is so important about us, about our togetherness, about the common language, about Zionism 22. And we also went back to read Herzl's original writings. And we are learning from him how to unite the people. Go back and read the tips Herzl left us. We must continue on his path. Nowadays, the demand for mutual Jewish guarantee is before us and obligates us to action. We must not click our tongues or shrug our shoulders and move on. We must also not leave the treatment of the crisis to the community struggling for its existence and be connected with passive observation. We are brothers and sisters. We are one family. If there is a crisis in the family, we should be resolved as a family. We should work together, speak, argue, restore the trust and prove in the pleasant way that the state of Israel is home for the entire Jewish people, wherever it is. Israel is a part of fixing the world and understanding that together more work should be done together. The World Zionist Organization has room for all of us, for you, for us. Together we can make it. I invite you to join the conversation. Come to visit us. Let's create a dialogue. Shalom from here at the Herzl Center in Jerusalem.